My name is John Morse. I am the board president of the World Affairs Council of Western Massachusetts, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you all today to today's Instant Issues program featuring Dr. Harry Dumay, president of Elms College, who will be speaking to us today about higher education, immigration, and the public good. So we especially want to welcome Dr. Dumay and his wife, Maggie Dumay. Wonderful to have you both with us today. Thank you. As always, we want to thank our Instant Issues sponsors, the Wilbraham and Munson Academy, and Sir Speedy, and also, of course, special thanks to NAA Plotkin, who are the managers of 1350 Main Street, for making this room available to us and all the other support they provide to the council. And speaking of Wilbraham and Munson Academy, we particularly want to thank Meg Lenahan Hutchinson, one of Wilbraham and Munson, and also one of our board members for being here today and for bringing a group of students with her. I think today's topic is one that students will find particularly interesting because we're going to be talking about the world to which you will be entering soon. And now a word about our speaker, Dr. Harry Dumay. A native of Haiti, he has served in higher education, finance, and administration at senior and executive levels for nearly 2 decades. Before joining Elms, Dr. Dumay served for 5 years as Senior Vice President for Finance and Chief Financial Officer for St. Anselm College in Manchester, New Hampshire. He currently holds a number of interesting board positions, Commissioner of the New England Association of Schools and Colleges Commission on Institutions of Higher Education, a board member of Boston Foundation's Haiti Development Institute, and a member of the Board of Directors and Finance Committee of the Catholic Medical Center in Manchester, New Hampshire. And if that's not enough, he's also a board member and chair of a small nonprofit dedicated to development projects in Haiti. He'll be speaking to us today about higher education, immigration, and the public good. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Harry Dumay.
Thank you, John. Can everybody hear me? Is this good? All right, thank you, John. Thank you, Sid. I'd like to thank the World Affairs Council for the privilege of talking to this group this afternoon. I'm humbled by this opportunity. The 2 speakers that I came to for the World Affairs Council were Congressman Rich Neal and Ambassador Mark Hambley. Really 2 impossible acts to follow, so I'm not even going to try. I'd like to first thank my wife, my lovely wife, for being here. You only need to speak to Maggie for 10 seconds to realize who's the better half of the couple, and it is not me, I can tell you. Also, glad to see some familiar faces. Trustees from the Elms College, as was mentioned, Kathy Riordan and Ellen Freeman, very much responsible for our family being in Western Massachusetts. So thank you for bringing me to Elms College, as well as familiar faces from the Davis Foundation, Mary Wallachie, glad to see you here. And as I'm mentioning trustees, here is Tony Signoli as well from Elms College. I'm truly delighted to be here. We do have, I think, a very important topic to talk about and to discuss. And I'll try to do it justice. In thinking about preparing for this conversation, there could be a number of voices that I could use, a number of angles at which I start talking about this topic. One of them could be that of a former foreign student myself, now American citizen, educator who is helping others achieve their dreams, and basically, essentially having firsthand knowledge of the symbiotic benefits of good immigration policies. So that could be one voice. It could also be the voice of a college president deeply concerned about immigration policies and what's happening to my students on my campus. Or it could be a policy analyst looking at this from a just neutral analytical perspective. The orientation and the purpose of the World Affairs Council made it easy for me to choose which one, because the World Affairs Council is to promote civil discussion of foreign policy based on information, not prejudice or propaganda. So the neutral analytical voice will be predominantly what we will try to do. But I say this to acknowledge that certainly I come with this topic with a certain amount of bias, even though we will try to approach it from a really policy analysis perspective. I apologize in advance if there are some of this bias that comes into the conversation. Sid. So those were two articles, two recent articles in the Chronicle of Higher Education. On the left-hand side, this was actually a cover story, first page, loss of global prestige. The United States appeal as a study abroad destination may be waning. The story on the right-hand side was an inside story. International enrollment dropped. The number of new international students drops for the first time in decades. The question is whether those articles are alarmist headlines or whether those are things that really higher education folks who think that the world should revolve around higher education should be concerned about, or whether all of us as citizens, those are issues that we should care about. Those are things that should be concerning to us. And I would submit that we should all care about that for three reasons. First, because higher education has contributed tremendously to U.S. innovation, to competitiveness, to the economy in general. Immigration policies have a profound impact on higher education, and three recent immigration policies threaten U.S. competitiveness in the long run. So those are the three reasons that I will try to unpack in the next few minutes. First, higher education has contributed tremendously to the U.S. Scholars of higher education, education economists, think of the contribution of higher education in two aspects, in two perspectives. One is a contribution to the individual, so higher education being viewed as a private good, and two, contribution to society at large. So higher education being looked at as a public good. Now, from a private citizen's perspective, some things are intangible. Fulfillment that comes from education for education's sake, being able to enjoy literature and those types of things. But there are some very clear economic benefits also that have been measured. The U.S. Treasury says that the typical worker with a bachelor's degree earns 2/3 more than those with a high school diploma. The Brookings Institute says that the median lifetime earnings for individuals with bachelor's degrees are twice that of those with high school diplomas. On the Khan Academy's website, you will see that individuals with a high school diploma earned about $1.3 million around their lifetime in average, as compared to people with college degrees that earn $2.3 million. Regardless of the statistics that one wants to use, that amounts to millions of dollars over the lifetime in terms of higher earning. But it's not just the earning, the potential for work is greater for individuals with a college degree. This is a little dated, but the statistics tells us that the unemployment rate in 2011 may be a better time to look at unemployment rates. For workers with a bachelor's degree was 4.9%, and it was 9.4% for people with a high school diploma. So certainly the economic benefits of higher education is proven. From a public good perspective, same thing. There are aspects of the benefit of higher education that are intangible. A more educated citizenry. Certainly in a democracy, we rely on each other to make good choices. And so when this citizenry is educated, the leaders that are elected would presumably be better leaders. So it benefits us that we have an educated citizenry. But there are also very concrete benefits for the public of higher education. The people with a college degree have, in general, a higher tax base than those without. And the Lumina Foundation found that bachelor's degree holders contribute $273,000 more in taxes over their lifetime than those without a college diploma. So from both a public good perspective and a private good perspective, it is well proven and well known that higher education has contributed tremendously to society, to the US economy. And as a result, the federal government has, over the years, taken a number of policy initiatives to promote higher education. And here are some of those initiatives. The first big foray of the US government, the federal government in higher education, is the 1862 Morrill Act, named after Senator Justin Morrill. The Morrill Act donated public lands to several states, and by states and territories, and by selling those lands, those states could use the proceeds to create colleges for the benefit of agriculture and the mechanic arts. At that time, it was believed that it was important for the US to promote its competitiveness in agriculture, and so that was the thrust then. The second Morrill Act of 1890, interestingly, had a civil rights component to it. It required each state to show that race was not an admission criterion in order to participate in the benefits, and if not, that those states should designate a separate land grant institution for persons of color. So that was the beginning of a lot of the historically black colleges and universities, including Lincoln University, my alma mater. Second big intervention of the federal government in higher education is the GI Bill of 1944, also known as the Servicemen Readjustment Act. And this was to help veterans of World War II enter great society. It granted stipends covering tuition and educational expenses for veterans attending college. Those two bills certainly moved higher education from I would say, the province of elite. As when Harvard was founded, it was for clergymen and politicians and lawyers, people who would be at the elite of society. But further and more, especially with some of these interventions, the federal government expanded higher education to be accessible to more and more individuals. The Higher Education Act of 1965 increased federal funding for universities, created scholarships, low-interest loans for students, and what all higher education institutions know very well now, that is known as Title IV, which is the whole policy framework for federal financial assistance for students. So with all of these policies, higher education moved from an elite model in the United States, from an elite model to a mass model to now a universal model. And the sociologist Justin Trow defines a universal higher education system as one in which anyone who wants some form of higher education can have access to it. And we would say that the United States certainly has that, and is one of the first nations in the world to have created a universal system of higher education. And another big intervention of the United States in higher education came in during the Cold War with the launch of Sputnik into space. The federal government realizing that science technology needed to be strongly encouraged in the United States. In the Harvard Gazette, there's an article that says the Sputnik woke the nation up serving as a focusing event that put a spotlight on a national problem. In this case, the problem was education. Congress responded a year later with the National Defense Education Act, which increased funding for education at all levels. And one of those areas is funding for science, for research and development in colleges and universities. And you can see that the increase has been tremendous over the years for research, for science and engineering research and development. Again, with the knowledge and the understanding that universities, colleges and universities, through the research that they conduct, benefit society tremendously, and therefore the federal government has funded it at a high level. And to this day, the federal government is the largest funding source for research and development in higher education institutions, again because of those of this same principle. In addition to providing funding and providing through economic policies supporting higher education, federal higher education immigration policies have also allowed higher education to thrive because of the number of international students that come to the U.S. And so you can see the chart on the left-hand side that number has tremendously increased in past decades. Hence the concern about it dropping for the first time in 2016. And on the right-hand side, you can see some of the countries that send most students to the U.S. The right-hand chart shows the situation in 2016, the increase or decrease by country. China and India remain the countries that send the most students to the United States. That has clearly very significant economic benefits for the higher education system. International students contributed $36.9 billion and supported more than 450,000 jobs in the U.S. economy during the 2016-2017 academic year. And this is from Fortune magazine. And so these are important numbers for the U.S. economy in general, but certainly institution by institution that attract and draws foreign students, especially given the demographics that we know for colleges and universities in the U.S., especially in the Northeast, with the pool of 18-year-old plateauing or shrinking at least until 2025. The benefit is not just from the economic side, it is also from the talent side. It has been really important for foreign students to come to the U.S. because they study and work and contribute to the research and laboratories in research universities. So foreign students have been a great source of really talent to fuel science and technology research in the United States. The chart shows us the science and engineering doctoral degrees from 1885 to 2005 by sex, race, ethnicity, and citizenship. And you can see at the top of the chart, foreign students have received the largest share of science and engineering doctoral degrees in the US during that period. And this is partly because of a K-12 issue, because researchers and professors for their laboratories are looking for the best talent where the talent is. And we know that worldwide, at the K-12 level, the United States has not ranked higher in mathematics and science. We have some of the data in the international arena, the trends in international mathematics and science study, TIMSS. This is a longitudinal study that is conducted at Boston College, where I obtained my PhD, actually out of the Lynch School, the School of Education. It measures science advancement and science achievements of students throughout the world, and it has been doing that for years. The trends, so TIMSS and 2015 data show that the US average mathematics assessment scores were well below the average scores of the top performing education systems. On the TIMSS mathematics assessment, average scores for the top 5 performers, Singapore, Hong Kong, South Korea, Taiwan, and Japan, were at least 55 points higher than the United States at grade 4, and at least 68 points higher than the United States at grade 8. And so that's one of the reasons why foreign students have contributed to the science and engineering and technology research in the United States. Those two charts on the left-hand side, this is a foreign share of US science and engineering degrees by degree. And by field, it shows that at the doctoral level, if we look at the blue bar, engineering, more than half of engineering PhDs in 2005 were awarded to foreign students. The right-hand side shows the countries where with more students in science and engineering programs at the undergraduate level, with South Korea leading and Japan coming right after that. We can look at this in a different way. The number of temporary visa holders that are awarded science engineering PhDs annually, and we could look at this over time and more recent data until 2015. The top line is for US citizens. So the largest share of all science and engineering degrees have gone to US citizens over time. But the next line is for non-US citizens, temporary visa holders. And that's a large share of the science and engineering doctoral degrees that have been received. If we look at engineering particularly, I think those two charts show the contrast. The left one, the blue line, shows all PhDs that were awarded to US citizens, and the orange line is for non-US citizens. So about 30% in 2015, 30% of the PhDs, all PhDs, were awarded to non-US citizens. But engineering PhDs, the orange line shows that by 2012, there were more engineering PhDs awarded to non-US citizens than there were to US citizens. My wife, Maggie, works for the Whitehead Institute, which is a biomedical research institute that does research in the biomedical space. And I worked for the College of Engineering at Harvard University. I worked for the College of Engineering at Boston College. In all of these institutions, what we know is that there are a large number of doctoral students, graduate students, especially in the fields of biotech, engineering, science and engineering. So to the point that this talent is sought after and expected by research faculties to work in laboratories to conduct the research that result in advances. So recent US immigration policies have been unwelcoming to all foreigners, including foreign students in particular. We have the 4 policies under the Trump administration that have had an effect on this. The first one is the travel ban. We all may remember on January 27, 2017, President Trump signed an executive order halting all refugee admissions and temporarily barring people from 7 Muslim majority countries. That created certainly havoc at the border, including from a number of scientists and doctoral students coming from Iran or Saudi Arabia. So that was certainly for all travelers were affected, all foreigners entering the country were affected, but particularly people in the science and technology sphere were also particularly affected. The second one is the federal visa, the reduction in the federal visa program for international graduates to work. This was in July 2017, and the administration also reduced the number of H-1B visas that were issued to foreign students so that they can conduct internships during or after their studies. A lot of the students, whether they receive sponsorship to come to the US or not, finance part of their graduate studies with loans, and with the prospect that the H-1B visa allows them to begin work, having internship opportunities and to remain in the United States. With the prospect of the reduction of in H-1B visas, the prospect of coming to the United States to possibly stay and work and pay back those loans really is greatly diminished, and so those students are concerned and worried about coming to the United States. The third is the rescission of DACA, the Obama-era program that shields young undocumented immigrants from deportation. In September 2017, President Trump ordered an end to that program. Basically, a lot of what the so-called dreamers, their situation in the country were put in limbo, creating a lot of concerns across a lot of campuses in the United States. This is currently in the courts. It has not completely been resolved. And finally, the final policy that doesn't necessarily affect higher education per se, but it is a general, it gives the world some sense of the U.S. Acceptance or not to foreigners. It's the end of the temporary protected status for people from Haiti, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Sudan. So those are some of the policies that have been enacted in the recent past. And generally, those policies are giving foreigners in general, but foreign students in particular, a certain sense of whether there's a change in what used to be an open and welcome atmosphere to study in the United States. As a result of that, we saw the headline with the drop in enrollment. Wall Street has taken notice. Moody's Financial Services rates the credit worthiness of higher education institutions, but of higher education as a sector in general. And Moody's Financial Services changed the outlook for U.S. higher education from stable to negative recently, as a result, partly as a result of immigrations. And the reason that they give for that is that growing uncertainty for international students' enrollment stems from immigration policies that are in flux. While this is happening, the international competition for foreign students has intensified. Canada, the UK, and Australia are the largest competitors, if you will, for foreign students. With Canada and Australia now taking the lead because some of the recent policies in the United Kingdom as well has created some of this hesitation of foreign students to go to the United Kingdom. So here are what Canada and Australia are doing. Some of the examples of headline. Canada aims to woo international students. That was in March 2013. Canada, Australia woo international students. And students may be drawn to these countries, smoother visa process and work opportunities. That was more recently in 2017. So this is for students, but scientists. France is positioning itself to lure away a lot of the US scientists, and with some success. Those are all of the headlines. President climate talent search drew 18 foreign scientists, including 13 from the United States, so with some success. The combined effect of all of this is taking a toll on the perception of U.S. higher education. And it's not even from people looking at it from the outside, it's from people internal to U.S. higher education. In 2014, 87% of U.S. officials, officials in the higher education sector, said that higher education here was the best in the world, or one of the best in the world. That number has dropped to 67% in 2017. And these are for people, from people who are internal to higher education. But the challenge has not gone away. This was from the National Science Board in 2006. America's competitive edge in this flat world, its strength and versatility, all depend on an educational system capable of producing young people and citizens who are well prepared in science and mathematics. And more recently, in 2018, knowledge-intensive production is growing worldwide and is increasingly a feature of both developed and developing economies. Education, research and development, and production activities are interlinked in today's knowledge economy. The competitiveness, the competition for talent, the need for science and technology has not abated. So what have U.S. higher education institutions been doing? Some of the responses of voices from the higher education systems in general. This was in response to the travel ban. University leaders called President Trump's immigration order a threat to American higher ed, and issued an open letter. A number of presidents issued an open letter to President Trump asking him to reconsider. And regarding DACA, this is a website, President's Alliance on Higher Education Immigration. This is presidents of U.S. institutions. More than 3 U.S. institutions have signed on this effort to try to at least obtain some clarification from DACA. 19 of the institutions are in Massachusetts, 6 in Western Mass. Elms College, as you can see, is part of this effort. Other institutions in Western Mass include Smith, Amherst, Williams, Smith, Amherst, Williams, Mount Holyoke. Harvard is certainly part of it in Greater Mass. And I believe MCLA, those are the 6 institutions from Western Mass that are part of it. And on Elms College, we don't have a huge international population, but one of the things that we say at Elms College is that we believe diversity, our diversity is our strength. And what you can see here is that, this is the website on the left-hand side, for international students to attract and make sure that international students know that we are welcome. But we are welcoming them. But the students take this in their own hands. This is not from the administration. So the picture that you see on the right-hand side, it was a soccer game that students organized, and they called it the diversity game. And they called it Many Flags, One Family. And students that are representative from various nations. And I was amazed to see the number of nations that we have on our campus paraded with their flags, showing that we are an international campus and that we are welcoming to all students. We try to be supportive. We try to find out which of our students are affected by any of these policies and try to support them in the best way that we can. So thank you for. We have some time for questions, so I'll entertain any questions.
I'm not a shield for Wilbur Munson Academy, but I want to ask the question about the relationship between Wilbur Munson Academy, which has a high diversity and a large number of international students, how many percentage-wise, you may not know this, but go to Elms College?
Well, I don't have those statistics, but that's certainly I'll look into that. And yeah, we commend Wilbraham Munson Academy for the diversity. I think we're kindred spirits in the fact that diversity really create strength and benefit everybody.
How does the huge number of Chinese engineering PhDs affect what we've been hearing about lately, all the Chinese stealing of our technology, software, et cetera? Are they going home with that technology?
Yeah, so the question here, on the one hand, there is the influx of students that are learning and taking knowledge and possibly taking them back. There is actually a large number of Chinese students that remain in the U.S., but more recently, there have been an effort of the Chinese government to draw more of these students back. But the other aspect of your question is the question of technology transfer and the appropriate level of technology transfer. One of the things in which, one of the silver lining, bright side of this is that the U.S. continues to be one of the leading exporters of technology. So I have some of the data here. Export of intellectual property by nation, the U.S. ranks first, and the European Union ranks second. So in most college campuses these days, you will find those technology transfer offices that patent inventions and license them, and the goal is to be able to license them regularly, and so Chinese companies can obtain a license to use inventions made in the U.S. Or U.S. universities. But when they obtain this technology and utilize it without the proper license and the proper patent, that's what you are talking about in the quote-unquote the stealing of intellectual property. That's a different aspect. That's a different policy, and I know that the administration is very much keen on making sure that U.S. inventions and patents and technology is used appropriately, and U.S. companies and universities are appropriately compensated for the research and the development that happens on their campuses.
Hi, I'm Meg Hutchison. I'm actually a curriculum at Wilbraham Munson Academy, so thank you for that shout out. In relation to that question, in addition to technology transfer or intellectual transfer, can you speak to your experience that along with that technology transfer, that intellectual transfer, are there other transfers that happen, maybe culturally, socially, critical thinking skills, exposure to students when they come to the United States to learn here of other things they take back to their countries that are rooted in our educational system that can be an additional transfer that people may not know about?
Yeah, absolutely. There is this really, truly symbiotic effect of cultural exchanges that happens on high school campuses, on college campuses. When students come to our campuses, they'll learn about American culture, and they'll learn about some of the aspects of general education in the United States, but also just the popular culture. And that has been proven to be one of the best forms of diplomacy for the United States, because they take this, and the love of the U.S. comes mainly from those exchanges. But similarly, our students get exposed to cultures, different cultures as well, in this world that is increasingly interconnected and flat, as it said. That, it is it's critical for our students that are going to operate in an international world to have seen different cultures and to have seen that. So there have been U.S. policies that have strongly promoted these types of exchange. Of course, the Fulbright program being one of them, but also there have been, President Reagan created a scholarship programs for the islands of the Caribbean to to promote this type of exchanges for the Caribbean as well. So it's a very important aspect of the diplomacy.
I have to ask, because I can't let you go without asking about Haiti.
Yes.
Do you see a possible solution between, the relationship with the Dominican Republic and, the treatment that Haitians are getting, from the Dominican Republic? I'm ashamed that my family is from the Dominican Republic, and the way the Haitians are treated, I'm ashamed, because it's part of the economy. They contribute to the economy, and they're helpful, and it's visceral. They're even talking back to 1844, when the Haitians took over the island.
Yes.
So, do you see any possible solution to that problem? And if you do, in what sense?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for your question. I'm not sure we have enough time, but just to clue our audience, just to clue the audience, in Haiti and the Dominican Republic have a troubled history. They both share the tiny island, have been one country at various points. Haiti has its part of blame in the relationship for not having treated the Dominican Republic well. That's the point that you were mentioning in 1844, where Haiti took over the island. But the recent history has been more troubling, as my friend here said, from the Dominican Republic perspective. And it's a deep, as you know, from having been raised in the Dominican Republic, it's a deep cultural issue. It's right. It's deep racism. It's not necessarily based on any policy, and so it is within the society's cultures at the school level. That's where it starts. Any politician coming with a treaty or anything like that is not going to solve it, because it is ingrained perceptions and attitudes towards one side of the island, of the other towards colors of skin that are creating this problem. So it's an ingrained problem. It certainly can be resolved with appropriate campaign, with appropriate willingness, but it's a very, very deep cultural issue.
Thanks a lot for that very fast overview of policies and impacts. Are we seeing a pendulum swing here? I mean, is this a change in the weather or the change in the climate of education? Do you see that the policies that seem to be lined up against higher education and education in general have increased significantly, certainly within the past couple of years, but over a period of time? Do you see that reversing at some point?
Yeah, one would have to hope that it is a change in the weather, not a change. Not.
You can't give us any hope.
Well, I think the hope comes from really articulating, and others are doing this a lot better and a lot more thoroughly than I just did here, articulating the long-term impact for the U.S. competitiveness. And I think policies that may be taken in haste, without a lot of thoughtfulness, without understanding what is behind the architecture of the U.S. Economy, competitiveness, research and development enterprise. Those types of policies have long-term implications, and the articulation of those implications, I think, will bring some sense back, and hopefully that is just a moment that is passing. And it isn't.
This administration that we presently have is not only those 4 areas you put up in terms of DACA, also seems to be recommending cuts in legal immigration. Will that only compound our problems?
Right. Well, anything that makes us seem to be less open to foreign people, talent, culture, is certainly not going to be helpful. Yeah,
I was alarmed that the Supreme Court of Arizona recently ruled that it was illegal for the DACA students to get in-state tuition. And, you know, there's, I think, 3,000 students, or I don't know the number, that are affected by that, and will probably, a number of them will have to drop out of college because they can't afford it. And then there's another, I don't know if you can speak to it, but maybe Wilbraham Munson, that the trends that you've shown us on higher ed are the same for our high schools, the private high schools and the prep schools that also, you know, bring in international students. That's the same.
Right, right. Unfortunate impact. Did you have a question?
I'll ask you another time about something you said about better education making for better politicians. That intrigued me. I was wondering, there was an announcement, I think, a little earlier today, I think I saw on social media, about the Elms reaching out to students at Mount Ida. And I was wondering if you could just touch on what that was. I thought that was pretty cool.
Sure. Last Friday, last Friday, Mount College announced that at the end of this academic year, it will cease operation, that it has been acquired by the University of Massachusetts. And so there had been agreements between the administrations of the University of Massachusetts, particularly UMass Dartmouth and Mount Ida, for those students to be able to move seamlessly into UMass Dartmouth. And when this was announced to the students and parents of Mount Ida College, a lot of them were very upset that at the limited number of choices. And so since then, a number of institutions, including Elms College, as you saw the announcement, have reached out to Mount Ida College to let them know that we will take a number of measures to make it easy for Mount Ida College if they're looking for we have a similar environment, small college with a lot of high touch, with a lot of some of the athletics programs that attract some of these students, similar population, very diverse, very open, and some of our academic programs actually overlap very closely. Some programs that you don't find everywhere, for example, they have a graphic design program, and we have a computer information technology program that overlap very well. So to make it, to create a process for those students, should they want to transfer very seamlessly with for example, a one-page application process as opposed to the drawn-out application process, because they were already into a college, they were already admitted and working into a college. So that's what that's about. Thank you for the question.
Forgive me if this is not strictly on the topic, but I'm wondering whether there's any relationship between the trends that you've described with respect to immigrant studying here in the U.S. and any trends that might exist with respect to U.S. citizens studying abroad, which at least anecdotally I understand is increasing. I don't know whether there's the same forces working on.
Yeah, I don't know of an abatement in the students studying abroad movement. Most campuses, and again for some of the reasons that I have talked about, the benefits of our students being exposed to the wider world, most campuses are promoting, whether it is semester abroad, year-long abroad, or short-term abroad exchanges, for our students to take part in those types of activities and experience the world. And so that has been on the increase. I'm not sure that there has been a decrease in that. One of the things that not colleges but individuals themselves and parents might not be as enthusiastic as encouraging their children to go abroad is because of certainly a perception that the U.S. is less friendly these days, and which might reduce the view of foreigners towards the United States, and that creates a chilling effect for some parents, as their sons or daughters are coming and saying, "I would like to study for a year in Colombia," and they're saying.
I was actually thinking more of U.S. citizens actually enrolling and matriculating in foreign universities. I don't know if you have any information about that or any thoughts about that.
I don't have specific data on that. To start with, it's the English-speaking countries would be the ones where U.S. citizens are going the most. So Canada to the north, McGill is a destination for some U.S. citizens. The UK, Australia, and New Zealand would be some of these other countries. And I don't have any recent data on the trend as a result of what has happened. But I think that's an intriguing question that I'll look into. Final question?
With the rising cost of higher education in general in the U.S., do you see any of that impeding any foreign entrants to higher ed here in terms of just financing their education in general?
Yeah, it's the cost of higher education, or let's say the price of higher education, it's slight distinction, has been a concern for students, both citizens and foreigners alike. Certainly, it's a lot more for foreign students because it's a lot more expensive to convert into U.S. dollars for foreign students to come to the U.S. And so you see a lot of the countries that I indicated that are strong exporters of students to the U.S. Are some countries that their governments are sending students. So China, Saudi Arabia, those countries have programs that are sending students with scholarships to the U.S. And so that certainly is not abating. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for
Never Look an American in the Eye by a former speaker of Libby about immigrating to the United States to get it.
And with that, I'm looking you in the eye and say thank you.